This is Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast, and I'm here today with Jeddy Azuma, the creator of the Rising Man movement. Welcome, Jeddy.
Honored to be here with you again, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's exciting. We are exploring deeply into the universe of the Rising Man, and today I'm going to have you on Green Planet, Blue Planet for that. I want to just right from the get-go hear from you. What was the calling? When did it happen? And what was the calling that you're like, I am committing my power, my energy to forming healthy relationships between men?
Cool. Well, there's a couple crystalline moments. I'll give like a few bullet points over the stretch of about 5 years is when it happened. It started when I was 23 years old, and I realized that I had no idea what it looked like for me to be a man in this world. I had no mentors, nobody to model after. I was in my own spirals of addiction and addictive tendencies living in New York City. And I knew I needed something else. I needed something different. So I went and sought that out. At 25, I took a 4-month journey with just a backpack traveling all over the United States, mostly the Western coast, and ultimately found a men's team that invited me in, a team of men that were all pretty much twice my age, had adult sons that were almost my age. And I just spent the next few years completely soaking up what that space had to offer: vulnerability, intimacy, challenge, and the full spectrum of what men can offer each other that I'd never seen before. And after a few years of that, I started to talk about this stuff with other men in my life, my close friends, realizing that I had something now that most other men walking the planet didn't. That space where I could be vulnerable, honest, take off my mask, be challenged and embraced at the same time by men who really cared about me. And so I realized, okay, here I am. I'm about 27 years old at this time. I want to give this back. I want to make sure that there's other men who have access to it because it's completely changing my life. And so I got involved, started doing some coaching with men, got involved with helping coach a friend's men's program online, a friend of mine, Preston Smiles, who started a program called Man Cave. And in that first round of Man Cave that we did together, I was like, man, how can I get this message out to more people? And I'd been soaking up so many podcasts at that point. I was like, I'd never, ever recorded anything before in my life. But I said, I want to do this. I don't know why, but I want to create a podcast. And one day in a coffee shop, sitting at my laptop, thinking about what am I going to call it? Boom, like lightning, Rising Man podcast came into my head. And that was the end of 2017. So that's kind of what got me to this point where I said, okay, it's time to put this out into the world. And it's just evolved from there.
Powerful. It's powerful when we follow that inner calling, that inner clarity,
Mm-hmm.
and that void, right? That
Mm-hmm.
that place that we're growing in. I feel like this is the real reason many podcasts get started, is to be on the journey of development.
Yeah.
Give us a bit more. I want to hear like your perspective since then. I mean, this is a space that for many people listening and for many people like that are tuned into like your audience and my audience, this has been a growing field in the last years, right? It's like showing up for community, showing up for women's circles or men's circles. And so what in retrospect, like having done it now for a few years, what is one of the most gratifying elements about gathering men, and what makes it like, you know the connection to the name of your movement, the Rising Man? Like, what is the rising element about it?
Yeah. Well, back when I started working on the podcast, I was doing some research and I only found 12 other podcasts that were specifically engineered towards men and the experience of being a man on this planet. Only 12. There's
Wow.
probably like 1,200 of them now.
Mhm.
And which I think is a really great sign. I think this conversation, even the word men's work, we weren't even putting it in quotation marks back then. Back then we were
Mhm.
saying men's work and people were like, well, what's that? Is that like men's labor jobs, like blue collar jobs that men do? And so that was back in 2017. We're recording this in 2022. And I would say
Mm.
men's work has become much more of a household phrase that we describe. So it's a whole different frontier. With that, a lot of great things come. There's a lot of more dialogue, a lot more men who were never having deeper, more vulnerable and intimate conversations with other men are having those conversations now. And there's also a cost to it. I think there's a lot of men out there who are repeating what they've heard other men say or other men's coaches, other leaders in this field, but it's not fully grounded and embodied yet. And so my mission has always been to, I don't care about being the biggest men's podcast there is. When you ask me, what is a rising man? A man who is a rising man is someone who's risen into their full expression of their purpose. and they're using that purpose is driving them to be a leader in their life, even if that's just being a leader in their family or in their community, on their block. I don't care how big that vision is, but just a man who's risen into that place of purpose. Because without that purpose, that's when we start to see all of these other problems that people call toxic, like all that talk about toxic masculinity. That's just men who haven't had the space or the freedom to fully explore their purpose and find a way to give it back. That's my opinion.
Right on. So in other words, that's really what's most required in this world right now, is for men to connect with their purpose.
I think
What's
so.
the purpose? What's the purpose of men?
What is the purpose of man? I think inside the heart of every man, and anyone who's listening could just imagine the most vile man on the planet. That might be different people for, everyone out there, but just imagine whoever that man is, all of the story, the narrative you have about them, even if you don't know them personally. I believe that even inside the heart of that man that you're imagining right now, there's someone who deeply desires to just be of service, who really just wants to find a way to give back, to improve the world around him. And maybe he's disconnected from it. Maybe he's wrapped up in self-centered, ego-driven, what can I create for myself that's going to benefit me type of place. That's just somebody who hasn't grown into their full capacity of service yet, or they've gone through a series of wounding or experiences as a child that didn't serve them. And one of my big messages is, let's get more curious about those people that we say are vile, evil, toxic, and start to ask questions about, well, what can we learn from this to better support those men and these young men that are coming up, so that we don't repeat the same story.
Wow, that's beautiful. Bringing that curiosity to dig deeper, to find that shared purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeddy, it's definitely like touching my heart already. And if we've said this right before we hit record, like this is work that's come into my life just as much over the last years, because that level of sharing vulnerability and finding purpose, you said it as an example, like even if it's just being a great family father, in my quest of finding people with impact, with social impact, with creating, for a healthy planet, I keep coming back that if we do this in our families, if we do this with integrity and purpose in our families, then we do this for the whole planet.
Yeah. I mean, healthy people, healthy planet, right? A little bit of a spin on the title of the show, right? That's I think that's where it starts. And there's so many people who are saying that right now, that the journey first begins within ourselves. We almost got into this when we were recording for Rising Man, but I figured we'd circle back to it. You're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'm sure, right?
Yes.
So when you were a guest on my show, the tip of that pyramid, self-actualization, you spoke about that for a few minutes, and it spiraled into this other topic. I recently came across an article in the past year. A friend of mine named Crystal shared it with me, and she said, hey, check this out. And it was somebody who looked a little bit deeper into Maslow's research. And he was spending time, I think it was near the Blackfoot tribe, up in the Dakotas area, when he was, he was making these observations of indigenous peoples and their priorities and what gave them purpose in life, and contrasting that with people from more of a colonial Western background. And that's how the hierarchy came to be. But there was an extension of that original hierarchy.
See where
right?
this is going.
Yeah. And are you familiar with this article, or have you heard of this
No,
before?
it's the first time I'm hearing it. Yeah.
So I'll have to share. I'll have to find the article and share it with you.
I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
So self-actualization is really just stage one, right? Self-actualizing into your purpose. What I was saying before about everybody needs to identify their purpose and find a way to give it back. There was a second hierarchy where the bottom of that pillar of that pyramid was self-actualization. And then self-actualization lent itself to community actualization. So when we have an entire village of self-actualized peoples, because of our social structure has designed it and made it that way, we've raised our children in a way that helps them to become self-actualized, and so we are the same way, then the whole community is self-actualized. Say 100 people living together, functioning together in collaborative lifestyle are fully actualized, then that leads to the very tip of that pyramid, which was cultural perpetuity, which in my mind, I just translate that to legacy. Now, this is something we can hand from generation to generation of self-actualized peoples living in community, collaborating together. So that first version of Maslow's hierarchy was just, that's the individual journey, but what do we do from there? That's the missing piece.
Yeah, I love what you're sharing there, because it kind of, unties the knot or this clusterfuck of the conversation around like sustainability, what are the right things to do for the planet, what is the right thing to do for, regeneration, which at this point I'm fearing this turning into another buzzword, um, but at the same time, like, it's such a tight knot that if we untie it and we come back to you being you and truly fulfilling what it means to be you, aka tapping into your purpose of service, then turns into the purpose of service to the community. And as the community is actualizing that, we, as you said, simplified healthy people, healthy planet. And so that is such a formula. But once we step out of it from a conceptual point of view and we look at the embodiment truth of it, that's when we build resilient families, we build resilient tribes, we build resilient communities. And I believe that's what we need,
And it's when we say here in the States, right? That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the hard work begins. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City, way back in New Jersey. And I grew up in a very typical modern lower middle class type of lifestyle where I was going to school. I was, driving cars. My family, we were kind of boxed in, and we had our nuclear family lifestyle. And over the years, my experiences, my exposure, my personal studies, my relationship with my wife, our vision for our family has revealed this alternative style of living in closer relationship to the earth, like a combination of a return to old ways and a reimagining new ways that are appropriate for the times we're in right now. But I had this realization recently. We were up in Tahoe, and we were sitting in some hot springs talking to other people, similar mindset, going off on our visions. And we got to the point where we realized that we all had come from this background of nuclear family lifestyle, traditional American dream upbringing. And we were trying to create this new experience for our kids. And we're like, man, it's so hard. We were commiserating about the difficulties of living on land and the social dynamics of communal relationships. When you really try to do that, it's really hard. We've been doing it here on this land for the past 2 years where we live right now. It's really challenging. It's so much distance to cover in one lifetime, to go from this traditional nuclear family lifestyle to living off the grid in a collaborative communal fashion with council and, not one central leader. It's a lot to learn in one lifetime. And the stories that we are inspired by are from peoples who did this for thousands of years together, not just one lifetime, thousands of generations together. And so I think that's important to note. I think a lot of people are frustrated by how big of a mission it seems to create that experience. But the reality is yeah, that's a pretty big journey to take on.
Especially when our background, our first 7, 14, 21 years of life, no matter if it's New Jersey or Germany or Canada or Brazil, where I'm sitting right now, if you've been indoctrinated into the program of the separated family unit, the nuclear family, right? So if that's your program or your imprint, to come together in circle and hear everyone share what they have to share, that's whew, it takes a lot of breath and it takes a lot of patience. But truth be told, no matter where I go in the world, no matter what I'm participating in or facilitating, I keep coming back to those values, and I keep coming back to that is the path. And the more people connect to that path, the more real and the higher our integrity embodying this path. And the path is not a path of perfection. Like, that's the illusion of technology, that there one day will be a perfect human if we all merge with the machine. My listeners know that I don't believe in that, right? So the perfection is to be with each other. And I have a question there for you, because for everyone who's listening to the audio, Jeddy's wearing this awesome hat that says water in like a wicked letter.
Like alien language. I don't know quite what it is.
It's almost like a light language decoded, but I can read it. It says water.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is, I want to, it's more like a prompt. I want to hear about your connection and your love for nature. And well, maybe because I know a little bit of your background, I remember that you shared with me that there was an important journey into connecting with indigenous communities for the first time. Maybe you can start there and just tell us about that passion, that heart, that voice of nature that speaks through you.
Yeah. So my love affair with nature and the natural world didn't really happen until college. I had a buddy who got really into camping and backpacking, and he watching him on his journey. He went out and did like a solo overnight by himself, and it was like, you know, just really rugged. He really wanted to test himself. And so he invited me on one. And I remember on my first camping trip, I stabbed myself in the leg. We had a real small smoky fire. Like we were freezing our butts off. But I remember when the sun rose in the morning, that feeling of like, whoa, we did that. Like I spent a night outside under the stars for the first time, even if it was hard. That was when it all started. I knew that there was something about being outside the walls of the comforts of my home and buildings and structures and modern technology. What you're alluding to is I was doing an internship. I was studying as a physical therapist in college, and I was doing an internship for a whole summer. And I chose the Northern Navajo Medical Center in New Mexico, which was way on the other side of the country. It's a whole nother story in and of itself, how I got there. But half of my experience there was learning more of how to be a physical therapist. The other half was fully immersing myself into this community, which was really beautiful. I got to work with the Boys and Girls Club out there. We did some really great work, but I also got invited to participate in some of my first traditional ceremony. And the first one I got to participate in was a sweat lodge. I'd never really heard of this before, never experienced it. And just the reverence and the simplicity that was brought into that ceremony compared to what I witnessed going to church as a very loose Roman Catholic growing up as a kid was just so refreshing. And it was so natural. We were sitting on the earth. We were sweating together, men and women in this particular lodge. And I was getting dirty, which was the opposite of formal Roman Catholic ceremony, right? Like put on your suit and tie and go to church. It just felt real. And it lit something up in me, even though my origins come from Japan and from Italy and the Middle East in my family origins. I was so connected to this idea of spirituality that's connected with exactly what I could see and feel underneath me. So that set me off on this journey of just being so curious and interested in traditional Native American ceremonies and getting involved in Native American church. And you mentioned my hat, water. I'm one of those guys who's always saying like, I'll never drink water unless somebody reminds me that I should, or I've been like exercising. So there you go. Yeah. Cheers. The reverence for water and the things that I've heard when elders and people in these leading these ceremonies, when they speak about water and really just giving so much more reverence and appreciation for it, I realized I had a relationship with water my whole life. I just wasn't very conscious to it. I was taking showers, I was drinking it, I was surrounding myself in it, I was swimming in pools, but I never had given thanks for this simple molecule. And so just the humility and simplicity of these practices is so refreshing for me. And of all the things that I studied in my years, that's what really stuck. And that's what we are raising our family in is these simple values of being in relationship with what we see around us, not seeing ourselves as separate or more important than anything that we see.
That's a deep one. The simple values of nature. I'm about to embark onto a journey as we're recording this next week. I'm hosting an experience called We Are Nature, a 12-day immersion. And first time I'm planning this with my partner, to host a group of about 12 people here in Brazil in the Cerrado Mountains. And I keep coming back to less is more, simple, because my mind doesn't need to be in charge. My ability to hold that space, yes, but my mind doesn't need to come in to make it an entertainment, right? And so I hear you say that simple reverence is something that, is present in indigenous cultures across the world, where we can still encounter them and where we can feel that. And I also hear you say that simple reverence is when we kind of break free from the indoctrination of this idea of like, put on your suit and tie and look the sweetest, most proper you can, and don't dare to get dirty. I believe everyone listening can find their own connection to that. It's very, very real.
Yeah. I love talking about nature. I think nature is such a wonderful teacher. And I know even that, like everything is becoming so, I'm hearing the same things said over and over. Nature's our teacher. These things become so trite in my mind. But truly, when I want to understand something, I look out my window and I just observe what's happening around me. Even the realization, one of them I came to, I do a lot of, in this men's work, I do a lot of advocating for men to have a more full experience of the emotional spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Extremes of emotion, anger, sadness, grief, even joy and ecstasy. These are things that you don't ordinarily see men express, because for one reason or another, we've determined that those expressions from men are not safe.
Yeah.
One reason or another, or it's not safe for me to express that. But in nature, nature itself is violent. It's aggressive. To take care of a family in nature means to go out and to hunt and to kill, to protect your children from predators. Like nature itself, the whole perpetuation of life is very violent. And as modern peoples, many of us, most of us are sheltered, and we protect ourselves from that. Even those of us, myself included, I purchased meat at the store, and I'm not there for the ending of that animal's life. So there's a part of this where we're just so disconnected from the things that allow life to be possible, that it seems obvious to me why we don't have a greater appreciation for life, because we're literally not witnessing life happen. We're just experiencing a very small fraction of the pie, when all of this other life is happening around us all the time.
Right on. Yeah, there's a beautiful red thread there, which is when we connect to the fullness of that experience, when we connect to the fullness of that both simple reverence in nature, but also as you said, like the brutal force that nature contains just as much, then we're living real life. I feel like there for the last years and our lifetimes for sure, there has been this creeping voice in our consciousness to persuade us that real life is better to be lived through virtual reality goggles and the infinite realms of the metaverse.
I got so much about to say about that, man.
Yeah, let's drop in on that a bit. Like I absolutely don't believe it. I don't concur at all. I really believe that there's lots to learn from the realness of nature. And I just want to back up what you said. I don't eat meat, right? I'm a vegetarian. Well, a pescatarian, I should say. I do eat fish every now and then. But that's not because I don't believe that, you know, there is a way to connect with animals and get nourished from them. I just don't want to support the killing culture that exists. And I also, um, I see the rawness of nature. I wanted to host this podcast from outside of the balcony because the backdrop is just so much more pretty than what I'm sitting in front of right now. And it's like these green mountains and wonderful. But I get so scared because the thunderstorms roll in and they are massive here in Alto Paraíso. It's like you see like a lightning bolt like you've never seen before, and your whole body starts to shiver. And like, yeah, if you don't do the right thing and this kind of rain hits you like flash flood, boom, and your little human body is helpless. And so the rawness of nature is very, very, very real. And so, the protected suburbs of New Jersey, you don't experience that. The protected suburbs of Aschaffenburg or Goldbach in Germany, where I grew up, like I never experienced that. And so there's a disconnection to the reality of life that I believe makes it really hard, full circle to the beginning of this conversation, to tap into purpose. Right. So floor is open, Jeddy. Go for it. Yeah.
I feel like this is a little bit of an echo from the conversation you and I had. I think we were talking a little bit about gaming and the virtual experiencing that makes living, and I put that in quotation marks, living more safe. Because in a virtual video game, for example, I don't even know them because I don't play them anymore, but whatever the popular ones are, where people can go and they can fight, they can train develop a character and have these virtual battles. Those are a lot of the things that before any type of modern technology, young teenage boys were experiencing as part of their rites of passage, as part of their maturation into adulthood. And obviously different cultures at different times had different utility and function for warriorship. But now we're, like you said, even a thunderstorm, right? As a kid growing up in New Jersey, I was so excited and terrified at the same time by these thunderstorms. We would, on the East Coast, we would have these really intense heat, lightning, downpour types of thunderstorms. Never see that in California anymore, but in the summertime, that's what would happen. I remember being really scared by it. The first time that it happened, I remember seeing lightning in the sky, like, what is going on? And I remember my dad just made it really fun. He was like, wow, let's open up. Instead of closing the door, he's like, let's open the door. Let's see what it's like from inside the house, but like the storm door was open. And he's like, he's close to me. I don't think he was cuddling me, but he was close to me. And it just felt like, oh, I can experience this and it's okay. And there was this smallness that I felt in the face of this huge thunderstorm, but also like I was a part of it as a child, that I think the instinct would normally be, oh, there's a storm coming. Let's batten down the hatches, close the door, lock everyone up. And I'm grateful that my dad gave me that experience, because I've always loved thunderstorms for that reason, ever since that moment. And I even remember as a teenager, just thunderstorm was coming in the summertime. And instead of going inside, I'd call up my buddies and we would run in the streets, lightning crashing, just like getting soaking wet. And I think that's the stuff that a lot of teenage boys are not getting to experience now, because of this culture of safety and helicopter parenting, and being so terrified of what the world might do to our kids when we put them out there, that they're forced to have these experiences that shape them in a virtual world. And we're only making them more dependent on that, because of what we are kind of funneling them into, saying, no, you don't, this is not how you take risks. Don't take risks with your life. Take risks with your, virtual characters in your virtual world, because death would be the worst outcome, the worst possible outcome, right? Death, injury, getting maimed or something in an accident, the worst outcome. But again, we're so far removed from what real life is about. And I'm not saying be reckless. I don't want boys to go out and be reckless with their lives. That's not what being an adult is, or becoming an adult is. But learning what we're capable of in the world around us, not the world that's inside of our heads or what we can manufacture on a digital screen.
I want to take this a notch further. It's a little jump, but very much connected.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share about a expansive experience with, and mindful experience with, psychedelics or nature medicine, and how that allowed you to drop in even deeper into this awareness that you just shared?
Yeah. I'll share the first one that came to mind. I'll say this: I had much more involvement and use of psychedelics when I was in my 20s. Before I got married, before I had kids. I'm not opposed to them by any means, but that was where this was mostly going on for me. And the first that trip I alluded to, when I traveled for 4 months, it started in Yosemite. I flew across the country. I got picked up right after my 25th birthday by some college buddies who had planned this backpacking trip. And this was my first multi-day out in the wilderness, far from anything type of backpacking. We did 60 miles in 6 days, all through the Yosemite. It was amazing. And I was with college buddies. We were all 25 something years old. And there was one day where, we'd put in some miles, and this summer storm was coming through, a rare, summer storm for California's standards. And so we were just battening down the hatches. We were in our tents, and I was sharing a tent with a buddy of mine, and he had some mushrooms, and he'd said, hey, let's eat these mushrooms and ride out the storm in here together. And at this point in my life, I'd had some of those experiences in Sweat Lodge and some of these other ceremonies. So I was beginning to have more of a naturally oriented context of, okay, spirit is all around me. It's not some man sitting on a cloud somewhere who's making decisions for people. It's here. It's right here. And I think this thunderstorm must have lasted for like 2 or 3 hours, just downpour. And so here we are, we're just riding it out in the tent. We're on this, mushroom amplified experience, and the dialogue that we were having with my friend who I'd known for years, so much depth. And I when we would close our eyes, there's periods of times where we just completely stopped talking and hearing the raindrops. It was like I could hear and feel every single raindrop hitting the tent, but also the leaves and the trees and the rocks around the outside of the tent. I was so tuned in to what was happening around me. And that was probably the most potent part of that experience, was just feeling that sense of connection. Up until that point, I'd felt so stuck in my internal experience and my own internal strife that it was such a relief to connect with a raindrop hitting on a stone 5 feet from my tent. It's like this weird sense of, oh, the world is okay as long as raindrops are still hitting the floor and I can connect with them. I don't know if that you can relate to that, or if anyone else would understand that if they haven't had an experience like that, but that was the first one that came to mind when you asked.
beautiful. I'm grateful you're sharing, and and you're leading with that embodiment of vulnerable share. Because it's my experience with mushrooms as well. Is psilocybin is our friend, and it connects us to this grid of consciousness that allows us to have this multisensory experience. And especially when you create a safe space for it, it's life changing. And I think there's a place for it in our world.
Hmm.
um, we mentioned before, like, coming back to this idea of like this fake safety in this fake digital world. Yeah, there's like a war on nature that has been going on this planet, right? A war on our waterways. They're heavily poisoned. A war on our perception of nature as a dangerous thing we need to control, rather than like a thing with high voltage that when we understand it right, we find our place within it. And it's always been boggled my mind. There's this meme going around of um, a subtitle like God created psychedelic plants, and then humans make psychedelic plants illegal. And God, in this meme, he's obviously a pictured man with a white beard kind of style, like his hands over his head, because like, yeah, it's created for us to have a connection with it, not to endorse it, but to to share about this reverence for our planet and the planet's medicine.
Yeah, well, that's another thing I think we can observe in nature is that every other animal on this planet doesn't use or take any undomesticated, because domesticated animals can have similar tendencies, but any undomesticated wild animal never takes more than it needs, and it only ever seeks out what it naturally needs with its body. There's a part of being really in tune with the body and what its needs are and instincts. I think a lot of us are completely out of alignment with that, or largely out of alignment with it. And then there's just this idea of only taking what we need when we need it. But now that we have these huge houses and storage containers and garages, we can pack more and we can hold on to more and bring more with us. We can load up a bunch of food in freezers instead of just taking what we had in any moment. And I think that's another, it's a very subtle but significant part of the human experience. Is there's just these ways of being that affect the way we interact with the world, the way it's designed to be interacted with. Just like you said with, psychedelic plants, right? I don't think that it's any mistake that those exist. I think everything has a purpose and a function. But you can eat too much food, you can drink too much water, you can smoke too much weed, you can eat too many mushrooms, you can do it in the wrong
Totally.
context at the wrong time, and it would have an adverse effect. It doesn't matter what it is. So yeah.
Yeah, the quality of reverence and grace is something we kind of keep swirling around in this conversation today, right? And it maybe, your hat that says water brings that into my focus, at least, because water to me is one of those things. If we use water like a thing, the world we build unfortunately becomes sick. I travel a lot, and I travel to big cities sometimes because they're part of the pathways when you travel. And in big cities, no matter which country, actually, in big cities, the waterways are often a catastrophe. Like, they're heavily polluted by toxins to make them clean, quotation marks here. Or, you drive out into the suburbs and you start smelling the like sewage, and you're like, how is this the reality we've created on the blue planet, on the water planet? Where is our reverence for nature? And you said that animals that are not domesticated, they know how to only take what's theirs or what's theirs to take. I remember reading Robin Wall Kimmerer's book Braiding Sweetgrass, and there's a section in it where she speaks about, um, in her indigenous culture, you would harvest and you would always leave half for nature itself. So you would just leave the rest because you would, her culture at that point of that cycle was not in the arrogance that this Western dominant culture is, that it's all for us and it's all for the taking and it's all for the optimization of growth and profit, right? Which is a total arrogance, which is, I believe, one of our biggest disconnects from the rhythms of nature. And so this idea of leaving something, or for simply taking what you need in this moment, it's surprisingly foreign to most of us. And um, Yeah, for me, it's a through line to the topic that I've been on a quest for. Is this the through line to a healthy planet, a healthy society, healthy people, is to know our place and to know our purpose and to connect to it in a form of reverence.
Yeah, which, like I said, again, it's a lot of distance to cover. Everything that I learned from the moment I was born up until I started really thinking for myself when I left my house as a young adult is that the world is mine for the taking. Right. And I think I had some pretty respectful, service oriented, community driven parents. It wasn't like they were saying, conquer the world and leave a wake of chaos in your path. But there was the underlying notion that, hey, whatever you can take for yourself and bring back for your family, go out and get it. This manifest destiny, the world is your oyster, when really it doesn't belong to us. And on the other side of things, one of the messages that always sticks with me that I've heard these ceremonial leaders say is that even your life is not yours. If you treat your life as though it's yours and it only belongs to you, then that's also selfish, right? Because our lives, when we really believe in a life of service and a life of this, going back to what we said before, community actualization, it's a part of an organism. That would be like my fingernail saying the rest of this body is in service to me. All right. It's like, no, my fingernail knows that it serves a very specific function and it has the benefit of being supported by the rest of my finger and my skin and my bony structure and my other tissues, but they all function together. My fingernails, even though if I was less domesticated, right, my fingernails would help me to peel things so that I could get its nourishment, access it, and put it in my mouth so that it could feed the rest of my body and receive that nourishment. My fingernails not digesting nutrients that come from seeds and plants, right? It's just benefiting from, it's playing its role, right? Playing its role. And I think that's something that people are starting to ask themselves that question. What is really my role in this bigger picture? And so many of us are still really, really confused.
And I think it's important to admit that there are phases when I was confused or I am confused. Just like there's phases when I feel sad and there's phases when I feel depressed. Doesn't mean that that's a big part of my life, but they exist. And this illusion that we're all perfect, functioning, smiling robots, again, is like that's the biggest part of disconnection. It's because we're all competing with each other who's winning the popularity contest, rather than admitting I'm part of life. I feel all the things. I'm part of life. Me too. I feel this, and in that connection through the journey that we are on as humans, we could find each other. I have developed a belief that human intelligence expresses itself in relationship, in connection to the internal world as much as in the connection to the external relationships and family and communities. And a very important fragrance or quality in there is trust. And so I'm curious about, Jeddy, about you and how you experience trust, like what trust feels like in your body.
Oh man, I don't remember if I've shared this with you because I say it so often, but I'll say it again anyway for everyone who's listening. I believe the most valuable investment on this planet is relationships. The most important thing we could invest in, because it's the one thing that can withstand the test of time, right? Real estate, cryptocurrency, gold, all this stuff it's volatile, it changes. Relationships are those things that we will always need and depend on, just like water and other vital resources. I think relationships are like almost like the fifth element. And so trust to me is the currency that these relationships grow upon. And we make investments in these relationships by generating trust through our words and our actions, our words that we say, hey, Julian, I'm going to show up at 11:30 for this podcast interview and I'm here on time, ready to go. And you're like, awesome, man. Like, I know I can count on Jeddy
Awesome,
to
man.
be.
I'll be 5 minutes late.
But see, even that, right? You said, I'll be
Yeah.
5 minutes late. And then you were here 5 minutes later. So even when it doesn't go according to plan, I know I can trust you to come back and communicate with me. All of these things that happen on this subconscious level, often it's creating trust between ourselves and within ourselves. Like how I trust myself. I said I was going to wake up at 6 to go for a run. Did I do it? I did. I trust myself a little bit more. So all of those transactions happening sequentially, it's just like a 401k, right? Over time, the interest compounds and these relationships become strong. The relationship that we have with each other and the relationships we have with ourselves. So I think trust is really simple. It's doing what we said we were going to do. Whether I made a commitment or promise to myself, or I made that commitment or promise to somebody else. And even if I broke a commitment, how do I recover from that? Right? Because that's where the shame cycle comes in. Oh my God. Right? Like, what did I do? Oh, this person's never going to trust me again. Well, if you can come back and say, hey, I know I told you I would be here, and I'm sorry that I wasn't. Here's what happened. And next time, what you can count on me for is I'll do this better. Right.
That's when trust and integrity have an interplay, right? Integrity is not being perfect. Integrity is being able to clean it up just as much as showing up. Yeah.
Absolutely, because we're also human. we're not yet AI robots.
No, thank you. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm out.
I'm out. Yeah. So, if that resonates with you listening, say no. But it's funny that we're talking about it, because this shared humanity is like, this is the time when we need to stand up for it and insist on it over any tactic confusion program of the good player, the bad player, the government, the this system, that system. It's like, if you paid attention, that will go on forever if you pay attention to that, and if you start paying attention to your humanity and your path as a human on this planet and your shared humanity with others, suddenly there's a breath and there's space for it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is, I don't think I've told you this yet. This is the question that made me start the podcast, and it's about our 7 generational context in this life, and so I want to ask you, connect to maybe to your dream that you have for our 7 generations into the future. What's the dream inside of you that makes your heart beat ever stronger in this world? That is a dream that is 7 generational.
I love that you asked that. I'm a very visual, visionary type of person. When I think of 7 generations, I actually see snapshots, like a film that's playing out in the future. And I imagine seeing my great, great, great grandson and granddaughter with their families sitting in ceremony together with just this simple and humble reverence and existence on this planet. I don't see big buildings. I don't see fancy cars. I don't see any of these. But what I do see is I see trust. I see love in relationship being exchanged. I see honesty and integrity in words being exchanged between my I don't, what's the opposite of ancestors? Processors, I guess. Future cestors, whatever they are.
Recestors, yeah.
Recestors, yeah.
The second language here.
Yeah, and I don't know either.
That's me, yeah.
But whatever that is, I also imagine that there's just if we've done what we needed to do if I did what I needed to do in my lifetime, I'd like for my great 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 grandchildren to know the names of all of their ancestors coming all the way back to me, and to know what we chose to do with our lives, and that they can tell that story and share that story with their kids. That's one thing I feel like I really lost the benefit of. And I think so many people from, migratory peoples, we lost where we came from because we abandoned these stories of who we were, who we are, because it's still in our DNA. So I have a firm belief that recreating these ancestral narratives and storytelling is going to be really important. So I imagine my great 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 grandkids sitting around a fire with their families, everyone happy, simply sitting on the ground, telling stories of their ancestry and where they came from and why they do the things they do now because of what the ancestors taught them. And just knowing that I'm looking down on them, praying for them and supporting them in whatever way I can.
So I have one last question for you, and that's about that path of these, great 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 grandchildren. So if you were to, change the education system, or create your own education system, or just talk about education, what do you think is important in raising incoming generations of epic spirits here to be human? What would be a few ideas on that?
Oh, I love that question. This is something a lot of people know about me. I've had, the XMen, right? Like XMen comics and all that. So I was a huge XMen fan. So I've always had this fantasy of having like a Professor Xavier's school for children. And I know we can't like shoot lasers out of our eyeballs at this point, but to have a school where a child and their innate abilities, interests, and passions it's identified at a young age, because they spend so much time with their aunties and uncles and parents and grandparents that all the elder folks in the community can see it in that child. They say, you know what, let's have this child spend their time exploring this, because this is where their passion, this is where their purpose lies. And somehow developing a curriculum. My son right now is in a homeschooling co-op, which is actually a pretty close step in that direction. From what I've observed, there's a lot of free play. It has the right amount of balanced structure, like the simple life skills that need to be a part of an organized educational curriculum. But there's also this freedom for them to really be themselves. And there's all different types of kids in this co-op. It's awesome to see them all interact with each other. So to me, I understand centralization makes things more efficient and simple in a way, or maybe easy in a way, but it also creates this cookie cutter society where all of us, and if you don't fit in to the cookie cutter mold, you're useless, right? You don't have value, you don't have purpose, you don't have meaning. If you want to be an artist, well, there's no time for that. You better go and learn calculus. I want to see educational models that really support the natural passion and trajectory of a child from a young age. And it requires a lot of attention, a lot of care. It's really hard when we're living in this society with parents that are, two full-time working parents that ship their kids off to school, which to me is just glorified daycare in a lot of situations, just so we can do the same old thing. But anyway, without going too deeply into it, that would be my ideal scenario.
Like you did go pretty deep there right away. That presence and attention, to children, having spent time in different alternative approaches, and not a ton of time, but significant. I think that is a pivotal factor for who we become as human beings. And full circle for this really beautiful conversation with you, Jeddy. I think this is a pivotal factor in all relationships, is when we can be present and we can give each other that gift of attention, then something heals within us, where we don't have to seek that attention on our Instagram feed or on our Facebook feed or in any form of digital reflection, where we can simply experience it with each other.
Yeah. There's a lot of, it's really easy to give technology and all these modern conveniences a bad rap, but even just the nature of these conversations. I mean, we've never met in person. In order for us to have this conversation, it would take a tremendous amount of effort and resources and time. Other modern technologies of getting into airplanes, if I was going to just leave my house now and walk to Brazil, like maybe we can go record this in like 4 months.
You'd be here in 4 months? Well, man, that
I don't know. I'm just throwing it. I've never walked to Brazil.
Well,
I don't know how
if
much.
I walk halfway the other way.
Yeah, we'll meet somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. Not to demonize it either, but there's a lot of ability that shows up with it. But these tools are both. They're a connector and a distractor, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and using our tools well, right? That's another thing that's really important in indigenous communities, is having respect and reverence for tools and knowing how to use them properly with respect. Otherwise you hurt yourself or you hurt someone else.
Powerful. There were so many gold nuggets in this conversation, Jeddy, and I really, really appreciate your time, your presence, your path, the way you connect with people, and the way you play. And maybe we won't meet walking between Brazil and the United States, but there will be another way for us to meet in person. For everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. Is there anything else you want to add? Any shout out you want to make? Anything you want to feature before we wrap this episode?
Only that if there are purpose-driven men out there who want to be in community with other purpose-driven men, come check us out at Rising Man Movement on Instagram. You can pretty much follow and find anything you want to there. Just the conversation of manhood and masculinity on the Rising Man podcast. We're always talking about some of the things we addressed here today. So yeah, just honored to be here with you, man, and have another conversation with you. Whenever it happens that we get to meet and be in physical proximity of each other, I look forward to that.
So much.